Oh, my God. Look at you. You broke down and got a video camera, Dan?
It did. I bought a computer a couple days ago, and the old camera didn't work. So, yes, I did.
You are one of the oddest ducks that I love. I love your weird life that you have. Where do you live? Are you in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont? You're always in some cold place where you're doing some weird weightlifting experiment. Where are you?
I live in Massachusetts, and I have a cabin that I haven't been to for a few weeks in Vermont, which I love.
Yes. And I think about a year and a half ago, I asked you about your writing. We talked on the phone one time, and you said, I'm working on this story, a complete study of Frank Meyer. And I was like, Frank Meyer? I go, you call yourself a conservative. You should know who Frank Meyer is. So I started looking into it. Let me tell you something. If anybody needs to hire somebody to find anything, Dan Flynn would be the guy. Tell us about the journey to try to track down the life of Frank Meyer, the man that is credited with starting conservatism in the United States. Where did you have to go, Dan, for this book you've written?
I did a FOIA request on him, and the government said, well, check back with us in the 2030s. During COVID, all of the archives shut down. And I was just in a desperate position. I needed to find this guy's papers. So I kind of wished them into existence. And for 2 years, I looked for them, and I finally found them in a warehouse, in an old Pepsi warehouse in Altoona, Pennsylvania. I actually left that warehouse 3 years ago today with 15 boxes, about 250,000 documents. And I spent 19 months of my life going through that, taking notes, and, finding letters from Tolkien, from C.S. Lewis, from J. Edgar Hoover, from Barry Goldwater, William F. Buckley. I have 1,000 letters nobody has seen from William F. Buckley, Wilmer Kendall, L. Brent Bazell, all sorts of early conservative leaders. And then I found really shocking stuff about when Frank was a communist in Great Britain. I mean, think about this. When Frank was a communist in Great Britain, he was calling for the violent overthrow of the government of Ramsay MacDonald, who was the prime minister. And at the very same time, he's having an affair with Ramsay MacDonald's youngest daughter in 10 Downing Street when Ramsay MacDonald wasn't there. I don't know, Che Guevara, Lenin, none of these people have done anything that brash and dramatic. Meyer did it, and not shocking, he was deported from Great Britain in June of 1934. And it's also not shocking that Sheila MacDonald, his youngest daughter, wrote him and said, and I have this letter, Frank, can I intervene? Is there anything I can do? There was nothing she could do.
So he leaves his lover behind, but he also leaves his love of communism behind in 1947. What was the conversion? I mean, to go from communism to conservatism or fusion, as he describes it, the idea of like libertarian and conservatism. Why did you decide that he was all of a sudden not a communist anymore?
There's a number of things that happened. One, he tried to join up in, he had been recruiting people to fight fascism in Spain and elsewhere. And when World War II started happening, he said, I want to fight Hitler. And the communists said, no, we need you here. He thought that was very strange. When they finally allowed him to join, he realized that the guys sharing his squad bay were not the proletariat that Marx had told him about. This was a rich kid who grew up in a high-hat hotel in Newark, New Jersey, went to Balliol College in Oxford. He had a lot of money, and so he was socially insulated. So that happened. And ultimately what happened was Frank began drifting away. The Communist Party realized that, particularly when the Cold War started. He said, we don't need another war. And they went with Stalin, and Frank said, no, I'm going with the United States. The Communist Party went to his wife, Elsie, and said, Frank's no good, but we still think you're a good communist. You need to divorce him, and you can stay in the party. And at that point, she's like, no way. She loved Frank a little too much. They were too devoted. And so they got out of Dodge. And about 4 or 5 years later, Frank found himself testifying in the longest, most expensive trial in U.S. history. He was called a mystery witness, and he sent 11 communists to jail, including Eugene Dennis, who I think has ties to Seattle,
yes,
and Gus Hall, and a number of other names that you probably have heard of.
So, Dan, when you discovered all these boxes, and there's a picture I saw today, I think it's up at American Spectator. Maybe you sent it to me. You're covered in this dirty shirt. Your hands and arms are filthy from going through all the dust of all the boxes. As you lifted each one of these lids and would read these handwritten letters from extraordinary people, as you say, from all walks of life, but every one of them just tingling with intelligence, and there's a vibrancy to it. You must have felt like, oh my God, look at this. Look at this. Because as you're putting all of this together to try to understand the life of Frank Meyer, were you just shocked at what was written and the people that were saying things about him, and you could actually see how his life progressed, and then as conservatism really formulated in his mind?
I was shocked, and I was shocked at the detail. It enabled me to write a very detailed autobiography. I know the man's IQ. I know who he lost his virginity to, and she has a Wikipedia page, so she's pretty famous. I know who he danced with. I have his dance cards from London School of Economics. It's very detailed. He led an extraordinary life, not just within conservatism. His next door neighbor is Bob Dylan. He hires the guy who writes Live Long and Prosper for Star Trek, Theodore Sturgeon, to write book reviews for him at National Review. He's the first person to print Joan Didion's articles as a freelance writer. So he was a great judge of talent. His best friend was Eugene O'Neill Jr. And if you've ever seen any of Eugene O'Neill's plays,
sure.
Eugene O'Neill Jr. was his grimmest, most depressing creation. And the last glass of whiskey that he drank in his life was from Frank Meyer's house. And the next day, Frank Meyer's wife discovers his body. Frank was very much in with a lot of the most famous people. I mean, there's a point in the book, a very shocking letter, because that's what you asked.
Yeah.
I look at this letter from this prep school teacher begging Frank Meyer to be this guy's friend, saying, I miss our scintillating conversations. I love it so much when we drink together. Let's take a cook's tour of this part of the country together. And then I look at the bottom, and it says James A. Michener. James Michener, the guy who writes Tales of the South Pacific, is begging Frank Meyer to be his friend. So the point of all that, whether he's sleeping with the prime minister's daughter or James Michener begging to be his friend, this guy had something electric. Men wanted to drink with him. Women wanted to share his bed. And so that magnetic personality that was able to Johnny Appleseed communism in Great Britain, it was also, strangely enough, able to spread conservatism in the United States. He founds the American Conservative Union. He's one of the founders of the Conservative Party of New York. He's present at the creation of National Review, of Young Americans for Freedom. He is a founder of the Philadelphia Society. So his fingerprints are all over the conservative movement. And it's strange that the guy had changed, his mind had changed politically, but his personality hadn't changed. And that personality that attracted people to him, that's what was able to make him so successful, both as a communist and as a conservative.
Yeah, we're talking with Daniel Flynn, writer for American Spectator, the author of The Man Who Invented Conservatism, and The Unlikely Life of Frank S. Meyer. So let's talk about conservatism. Is it now in a dusty box, packed away somewhere, and has sort of lived its life, and now we're into populism, and that we just sort of think, well, it sort of died out with Reagan. Is it still alive? Is there a pulse to anybody that would consider themselves to be conservative today, Dan?
Well, I think that if we can't conserve conservatism, if conservatives can't conserve conservatism, they don't have a lot of hope for conserving this country. So I hope that the answer to your question is no. Meyer's conservatism, which was known as fusionism, was sort of the default philosophy of the American right from Barry Goldwater well past Ronald Reagan. Obviously, it doesn't have as much influence today, but the whole idea behind that was that the American tradition was the founding. That's what's unique about the United States. And the founding meant freedom. So if you're conservative in Great Britain, maybe you're going to conserve the monarchy or bad dentistry or fox hunts. But in the United States, you're going to conserve the founding. So that's where you get the traditionalism. And what the founding means is freedom. Now, that's at its sort of base, simplistic level. But the point being that Meyer said that traditionalism and freedom are not in conflict. They're in cooperation. That you can't have freedom without these thousands of years of tradition. So you need to preserve it. You know, that we rest upon the Magna Carta and so much else. And you know, that's been challenged since then, but that was Meyer's basic view.
Myers also spoke about the idea of freedom, but also virtue. And that's where all of a sudden things can get a little strange for people, because people have now redefined what virtue is. We have this constant lifting up of my own individualism, and I don't need to respect whatever your virtues are and my virtues. And Meyer also said that, you know, liberty without virtue is chaos. So you have freedom, but you also have to have virtue in order for for society following a conservative point of view to exist. But don't you see, Dan, now as people redefine what virtues are, and I can live a virtuous society, or I don't need to be virtue at all, or that's your morals, but those aren't my morals. The whole thing kind of caves in on itself, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I think Meyer would have said that libertarianism is a good governing philosophy, for the federal government, but it's inadequate to govern people, for people to govern themselves. That's where you have to have virtue come in. And if you have the government doing that, it's compulsion. If you don't make the choice to do something good, are you really doing something good? So that's what he would ask. He was a huge fan of Tolkien. And I mentioned earlier, Tolkien is one of the letters that I have in the collection, and he corresponded with Tolkien. Tolkien, in The Lord of the Rings, of course, you don't want to, whoever's grabbing that ring, whoever has that power, they end up doing something that's nasty and not even if Gandhi has that ring, if Gandalf has that ring, it doesn't matter. It's all going to end the same way, which is bad. And I think Meyer's view of it was kind of like that. He didn't want to give anyone concentrated power.
Meyer's also, I thought it was interesting, the writing and the research I did, that he felt Lincoln was the most ruthless in American society in history for the authoritarianism that he demonstrated during the Civil War.
He did. He had a debate in National Review with Harry Jaffa. And the funny thing about that and a lot of his other debates is I have these letters between him and Jaffa, and they're laughing about this. They're friends. But if you were to read that debate in National Review, which Buckley was appalled that Meyer was saying such things in National Review on the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's assassination, no less, that Jaffa and Meyer behind the scenes were friends. They were saying, hey, when are we going to get together? Same thing with Brent Bazell. They had a knockdown, drag-out fight in National Review, and I have these letters that no one has seen between them where Bazell's saying, I'm going to excommunicate you from the conservative movement, and if Bill Buckley doesn't put it in his magazine, I'm going to quit. So we better put it in. And if when Buckley's gone away skiing in Switzerland, we'll slip it into the magazine then. But you would think from reading these articles between Meyer and the various personages on the 1960s intellectual right that they would have hated each other. They didn't hate each other. They were good friends.
So what happens now? Because, and by the way, go back to the Abraham Lincoln, he also holds a great amount of fault. He lays that at the feet of FDR, because what has happened is when FDR expands the power of government, takes away our freedom to give us security, then you end up with either or neither. So for as we are now, haven't we become addicted to the government providing all of these things for us, Dan, so that we have become weak and then easily manipulated, and all of a sudden to say, no, you're going to have freedom, but you're going to have virtue, and you're going to have morals, and you're going to have to be self-reliant. Like this line right here. And I asked Chat GPT to give me what would be the best speech from Ronald Reagan that Frank Meyer would approve of.
Freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. And those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again. Knowing this, it's hard to explain those among us who even today would question the people's capacity for self-government. I've often wondered if they will answer, those who subscribe to that philosophy, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else?
Would Frank Meyer cheer at that?
I think so. And, what was great was about 10 years after Meyer died, at CPAC, which Meyer came up with the whole idea for CPAC in the 1960s. They didn't implement it when he was alive. But Reagan speaks at CPAC, I believe in 1981 or not. I believe it was 1981. And he starts listing off all these conservatives. And then he does a long stop on Frank Meyer and talks about, Frank Meyer's the idea man behind the conservative movement. And it gets to your point earlier where, a lot of people didn't know who he was. You could write a book about Lincoln. You could write a book about Churchill. You could write a book about World War II. But don't we know enough about those things? And I thought, let me write a book about a guy that we should know about, Frank Meyer.
Yeah.
And that people like Reagan knew about and Goldwater knew about, and they looked to him for ideas. But I think the average everyday person, particularly now in 2025, They don't know about him. And I think for a lot of conservatives reading this book, it's almost like doing a genealogy. It's almost like doing a family tree. And you figure out why it is I believe what I believe. And because Frank Meyer, a lot of those ideas he came up with.
Right. So, Dan, what you've done is you've allowed the person who says, I have all these beliefs, I have a general sort of view of the world, but who helped to begin to forge that in the beginning? And it's Frank Meyer. And then you get a chance with the book to be able to see all of the brilliant minds that intersected with his throughout his entire life. And the crazy thing at the end, he was an atheist, but converts to Catholicism in the last few months of his life. He has cancer. He dies. But before he leaves us, I think, with an indelible map of a point A to point B that allows us to say, well, if we want freedom and we want to be able to have our rights and to be respected, I think Frank Meyer and I think your book just lays it all out so perfectly. I can't wait to read the rest of it, Dan. I thank you for your time. And again, Daniel Flynn, the guy I start my morning with on my phone every day. I'll let you get back to writing more. And I have to recommend right now, I'm going to do this for you. If anybody really wants just a great take on the news with incredible humor and insight and history, and then all sorts of links going back to YouTube of all sorts of rock and roll from the 60s and 70s and anything else. It's all there with Daniel Flynn, the writer for American Spectator. The book is called The Man Who Invented Conservatism, The Unlikely Life of Frank S. Meyer. Dan, thank you.